Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in about a minute. Thank you for joining us back.
Ouch. Let's see. Are you typing?
No, I can't type a question, actually.
Okay, cool.
Participants should be able to. All right, it's 2 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us for the last part of today's training on diverse populations. This section of the training is financial coaching for individuals with disabilities. Throughout the course of the day, we've been talking about financial coaching as it relates to youth and individuals with records. We've provided some resources, some basics of coaching, some tools, and this section is no different. If there's anyone new on the phone call, hello, my name is Andres Serrano with Heartland Alliance. I have with me Barbara Martinez, who is manager of asset building programs, and we're going to be facilitating this last section, which might not take the full 2 hours. With that said, I did want to address, for those of you who were here for the last section on individuals with records, that I have put together the resources of the employment resources and organizations that will help individuals with records find employment, as well as resources for individuals looking to modify child support orders and dealing with reentry. So those resources are already compiled and they'll be sent to you definitely tomorrow by noon, probably today. So you do not have to be so anxiously waiting for all of this good information. And again, everyone will have access to a copy of the PowerPoint as well as the tools and resources that we've been talking about throughout this training. So with that said, there will be opportunities for questions and answers, so feel free to write any questions as they come up in the questions box. And if you want to share anything with the chat, you can. Barbara and I will be managing that, so we'll kind of answer questions as we go. So feel free to just pop in your questions whenever you're ready. We're going to go ahead and get started on talking about individuals with disabilities and financial decision making. So I like to start off this part of the training by giving some data, simply because the numbers are pretty kind of wild in terms of the need of this community. So in this community of adults with disabilities, 11%, more than double of the national average, is unemployed. All right. So you have to double the national average and then add 11% more, and that's how many individuals with disabilities are unemployed. So unemployment is a big thing, and we'll talk about the challenges and also the resources of individuals with disabilities and obtaining employment. Along with that, that means that the poverty rate is also larger. It's actually 27% compared to the 12% poverty rate of adults with disabilities. This was in 2015, so the data is a little bit older. However, that just goes to show you that more than twice the amount of people are experiencing poverty simply because they have disabilities. Some of those challenges really come up in just there being limited employment opportunities. These jobs are not necessarily very well paid or have a lot of hours. Individuals in this community might be more than twice as likely to use non-bank services. For example, if you're receiving like an SSI, SSDI, a lot of the times you're already getting it on a prepaid card, and so that might deter you from actually having access to a bank. Other things might be comfort or actually general accessibility to banking services based on your disability. And I think a big thing that needs to be talked about in this community is that sometimes individuals with disabilities are not necessarily managing their own funds. They might have someone else helping out with that. And there's a lot of gray area there where those financial decisions might not necessarily be super autonomous, and someone might actually be making financial decisions for them instead of kind of coaching and really thinking about what are the needs of this individual, more than, you know, physical. And so I definitely wanted to start it with those so that you can see why there is a need for really accessing and utilizing financial coaching as a way to empower individuals for financial wellness in this community. So the first thing I want to talk about is accessibility. Accessibility is super, super important to think about as you're working with individuals with disabilities, because we want to make sure that the individuals in this community feel like they can access services, but also feel like we're thinking intentionally about the way that we provide services. And unless we work with an organization that directly serves individuals with disabilities, a lot of our organizations don't necessarily think about accessibility in a broader way, right? We might not consider maybe thinking of like the way that we speak of individuals with disabilities. We might say disabled individuals, where individuals with disabilities is more of a blanket term and probably a better term because you're putting and centering the individual rather than the disability. And so kind of by brushing up on those things in terms of language, to just be more intentional about the way that you address individuals and the way that you talk about services within this community might help really bridge that gap in terms of creating rapport and being intentional. So I definitely want you to think about the way that you refer to individuals with disabilities and always kind of center them first. And in the Dropbox, there is a document about all accessibility, and it helps you think about inclusive language, communication. You have to think about the way that we communicate. For example, how are we communicating and how are we sharing forms with individuals with a vision impairment, right? How are we actually addressing the needs of that participant, and are we able to provide documents with larger and bold print in a way that, you know, it's more obtainable and accessible? Also want you to think about, you know, what if you're working with someone with an auditory impairment? And so are we providing documents or providing information that can be, you know, transcribed and verbally, you know, returned to the participant? I want you to think about physical space. I think physical space is a big thing. As we're trying to engage participants, I remember when I started doing this training, realized that not all of our sites are actually physically accessible to individuals who might have like a wheelchair or other some sort of, you know, mobility disability. And so again, being intentional about where we invite participants to meet us, how we're addressing this, how easy is it for, you know, the physical space to be accessed, and how intentional are we about that? And then program requirement, as I mentioned earlier, we all have forms and we all have things that we need to provide to our funders based on our program requirements. However, and you know, those might require signatures from our participants, but how inclusive are we in terms of this documentation being handed to them? If we're giving copies, is it intentional? Is it inclusive? And is it going to be able to access with their disability? And so again, thinking of how we can modify forms, how we can simplify forms, and really how can we make this process overall more manageable and just easier for participants to access the service. We've been talking a lot about perceived barriers and actual barriers. And so if we can eliminate a lot of those barriers beforehand, I think that we can provide a more accessible and more inviting environment for participants with disabilities who are already kind of ostracized and are already on the margins of society. And so we want to be intentional about the way that we provide services. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover a bunch of different kind of financial topics and really think about how or what things stand out within the community of individuals with disabilities. So I think values, financial goals, time amounts, all of those are things that you need to consider with all populations. But with individuals with disabilities, one additional thing that we might need to cover or might come up are large purchases. I'm talking about, I might be referring to individuals with visible disabilities or maybe like mobility, right? Or more obvious things, but there are a lot of invisible disabilities and a lot of things that people are dealing with that might not be, visible. And so you need to be conscious of that. But I think besides all of that, I think one of the big themes, regardless within this community, is how do you prepare for large purchases? Because a lot of the purchases that these individuals have to make, they might be just like assistive devices, and a lot of those things are super, super expensive. Think about cars or adaptations to vehicles. You want to think about just in general medical expenses, how much time is being spent, kind of just accruing medical debt, and how much of that is being covered by insurance and how much is a person's responsibility. You want to think about home accessibility renovations, whether it's like ramps or elevators or things of that sort. And you also want to think about education. I think doesn't matter what community or what population or what kind of special or unique needs you might have. I think education is a common thing. However, there are tools and resources that you might be able to talk to participants about and help prepare for. So again, I just want you to think about large purchases in relation to an individual specific goals, but also because we're going to kind of move into not only like goal planning, but really thinking about like budgeting and employment and saving. And as we know, we need to consider different things as we're talking about employment and savings, because all of those things affect people's benefits. And so how do we get people to think about saving for large purchases, and what tools can we share with them, right? So that you feel like you can do it without the limits and constraints of income limits or savings limits. And so we're going to talk about that and address all of that. Before we do that, I want to expand a little bit more on assistive technology. So it's basically like just in a big umbrella term. So it's assistive products and services. Some of these things might be for independence or to promote well-being. Some examples are like hearing aids, wheelchairs, communication aids, glasses, to organize or memory aids. Globally, more than 1 billion people need at least one or more assistive products. And if you think about the way that people are aging, by 2030, more than 2 billion people will at least need one of these products. And today, to this date, only 1 in 10 people actually have access to those products. So you can tell that there's a big disconnect between the amount of people who need an assistive device and the amount of people who are actually receiving this. And a lot of the times, cost is a big, big barrier. If you don't have traditional or you don't have insurance that's going to help you navigate that process, you might have a hard time thinking about assistive technology as within reach for you. And so again, you want to be conscious of like this big disconnect and how can we as coaches really help fill in that gap. And I will actually talk about at the end. So once I talk about the topics, I will provide different resources, and I have some assistive technology resources to share towards the end of this presentation. I do want to move into like employment. And so how do we help participants with disabilities obtain employment? Obviously, we know that there are a lot of challenges. We talked a little bit about how like individuals might be underpaid, there might not be a lot of hours. And so how do we help our participants kind of navigate that real tricky system of, is there even a job out there for me? Or is there even an appropriate job out there for me? And are they really thinking about what I want to do, not just what is available? And so I want to talk about some resources. So WIOA is the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act. Some of you may be familiar with it. But really what it does is it provides new opportunities for people with disabilities to have more opportunities. And so what does that look like? It means that there's workforce services and preparation American Job Centers will provide accessibility for employment and training services. Young people with disabilities will actually receive more assistance so that they can transition from unemployment to employment. And legally, state vocational rehab agencies will actually have to set aside some money to help young people with disabilities. So there is now a little bit more assistance for participants who might be younger. And really what they're trying to do is provide the support in order to really get people into employment, okay? So when it comes to like employment, there's that, and I will talk about another. So there's Ticket to Work and Pass, which are all parts of kind of statewide resources for individuals to obtain employment and to really to kind of support them through that process, as well as to allocate funds that are designated for employment as necessary so that it does not count against the person's savings when they're trying to save for other goals. And we'll also talk about a really great savings tool that really kind of helps bridge that gap so that individuals don't have to worry so much about saving limits and their benefits by obtaining a product that allows them to save way more than they're allowed to under conventional restrictions, if that makes sense. Another thing that I want to talk about when it comes to individuals with disabilities is this whole idea of representative payees. So representative payees are individuals who are appointed by Social Security office to help manage the funds that are being distributed to the individual themselves. And so if the individual is unable, if the payee, who is the person receiving the funds, right, in this case the person with disabilities, is unable to manage their own funds, they would designate someone to help them do so. And so they do need to be approved by Social Security Administration, and this can be someone that is either a family friend, a family or a friend, or it can actually be an organization or a company that handles this type of management of money and distribution of funds. And really what their main duties are just to use the benefits to pay for current use that the beneficiary might need, and also savings for some of those goals that the participant might have. And if you've worked with individuals who might be working with representative payees or individuals with disabilities, or even older individuals who might be receiving some sorts of funds, you might know that, sometimes it's fine and it's a positive relationship that they have with their payee, and sometimes it's not a positive relationship. There might be a little bit of a disconnect. So as we talk about representative payees, I think one thing is really listening to the participant and seeing, if the participant personally made that decision to have that person manage their money, how is that going, and really helping give the participant options, right? As we talk about financial coaching and financial empowerment, I think that through financial coaching and empowerment, we can obtain, overall empowerment. And this is a community that is not, that needs to kind of regain control, right? In terms of just how the system works and how the system is set up. And so what better way to empower someone about their finances, even if they can't make a decision about it, how can I myself, personally use my money, but at least I can choose who's helping me manage that money. And I think that even then, that is like a big change of control and power there. And I think it could be a good empowerment thing for participants. We have representative payees do's and don'ts. Text is super small, but what I want you all to do is really take this slide as education for participants, right? To what can and cannot, what they cannot do. So on the left side is what they cannot do, what they can do, and on the right side is things they cannot do. All right. So you basically just want to let them know these are your rights as a representative payee, as someone who is your representative payee. These are the things they can and cannot do, and are these things getting done? And there is a representative payee worksheet as well in the CFPB guide for individuals with disabilities. I would really encourage you all to use that, which we're providing again in the Dropbox, but to really check out the CFPB guide, because that was created by the CFPB in conjunction with the National Disability Institute. And we were able to work with the NDI as well to develop this training that we're currently giving. So they've identified that this is a good empowerment tool for really letting participants know what representative payees can and cannot do as a way of empowerment. All right, so does anyone have any questions about what we've talked about so far before I start moving into earnings and SSI, SSDI, and so forth? And I can check the questions bar.
You don't have questions at the moment.
Okay, perfect. So then we can just go ahead and move on. This is hopefully you're able to just ask any questions that you might have or any clarifications. Again, we will share all this work with you, so you'll be able to review it again or really think about like what the talking points are. So as we start talking to individuals about earnings and SSI and SSDI, or for you for yourself as a coach to understand kind of why this is important in financial coaching, you really want to think about how work earnings affect SSI and how they affect SSDI, okay? So there are thresholds about how much you can earn and still receive SSI and SSDI. And so you definitely want to help someone manage that, right? I think the biggest conversation here, and I think for a lot of participants receiving some sort of public benefit, is if I go to work, this is they're going to take away all my public benefits or all my external help, and it's not going to be enough. And yeah, I think that's a common misconception that happens, that people think about. But you can earn money at work and still obtain, you might not obtain your full amount of SSI or your full amount of SSDI, but you will obtain something, okay? And at the end of the day, employment plus benefits will still give you more than what you were doing. And so as a financial coach and navigating that conversation, I would encourage you all to, one, there's a tool again in this guide, which is an SSI estimator. And so what it does is it gives you a scenario where it's like, okay, let's say you earn this much SSI right now. When you start working, this amount will not be given to you, but you will be able to get this amount. And then based on the hours you work, we will reduce it by this much. And so the equation in that worksheet, what it allows participants to do is really see, oh, if I work X amount of hours, I'll still be able to keep this amount of my SSI plus make this amount of money. And that gives me maybe $300 more than I would normally have to manage month to month. And so as a coach, I think that is a great opportunity for you to then interject and be like, oh, okay, well, that sounds amazing. What kind of things could you do with that money? What are some of your other goals that you would put those extra $300 towards? Right? I think as a coach, unless you work specifically with SSI and SSDI, you don't need to know the exact numbers. What you do want to know, and we do have the numbers in the PowerPoint, which I'll share with you. What I think what you need to really help facilitate is that conversation of, is this something that is right for me, working and obtaining benefits, right? And how comfortable do I feel? How many hours do I want to put in? And what are the possibilities with that extra little money that I can make? So I think that if you can really help individuals navigate that conversation, that's really where you're going to find the success. Because the worksheet is all hypothetical. There are so many differences just in the amount of things that people earn and in the amount that people receive from SSI and SSDI. So really, your job as a coach is not to be like, this is exactly how much you're going to get, but your job is really to help facilitate that discussion. Like, you can make up to this much. I can encourage you to talk to SSI, SSDI, and really come up with a more specific plan about that. But
And I will say that as a coach also, you can have the conversation with the participant about what does this job will do for you? Does it going to make you feel better? Does it going to make you feel healthier? Does it going to bring fulfillment to your life? Because that has a value too. And if that is the case, maybe it is something worth exploring. If it doesn't work out, then we'll go back to your, your benefits and recalculations.
So yeah, I think that as coaches, that's really where we can kind of support our participants the most and really help facilitate those questions. And again, telling individuals, okay, well, if you work, that's going to affect your, SSI, but you shouldn't be scared because there's still some possibility there, and really think about and their goals and how this will fit into their life, as Barbara mentioned. And I'm going to let Barbara talk a little bit about ABLE, because I think ABLE is super important, and it's also just a great tool for individuals to save.
Okay, so thank you, Andres. Again, my name is Barbara Martinez, and I'm the manager of asset building programs here at Heartland Alliance. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the ABLE accounts. As Andres mentioned before, for individuals with disabilities, really hard to accumulate assets because a lot of this will impact the amount of other benefits because they have a limit. If they were to be eligible to open an ABLE account, they can put a lot of money in these accounts. So let me start by who is eligible. You need to be, your disability have to be diagnosed or started before you were 23. So that is like the most important one and the more difficult one for our participants to meet that threshold. The the other one I think is to meet the description of disability of the Social Security. So most of the participants that we work with, they already have been approved by the Social Security Administration. So their disability have been already acknowledged. But it's more about when did it started. So suppose that you have a participant that qualifies for this. This account allows the participant to put up to $16,000 every year away, and it will not impact their benefits at all. And this will help them cover anything that they need from transportation, medical, medicines. I can read you the list. We have a whole PDF on it, but there's a lot of expenses that a person with disability will need to pay for that Medicaid will not cover, that this will be taking over. In like, for example, employment training, things that you cannot even imagine that this will cover. It will cover that. Transportation, living expenses, a modification to the apartment where they live, assistant technology for their disability, personal support services, healthcare expenses, financial management, and administrative services to manage their money in their ABLE accounts. So there's a lot that can be covered with this account. But again, the tricky part is make sure that the participant is eligible. If it is eligible, in the one pager we're going to send you is a website from the Department of Treasury that they will go to open the account, and anybody can contribute to this account. So if you, for example, have an aunt and she wants to give you $500 and you don't want to put it in your saving because then that will affect your benefit, you can put it in the ABLE account. So that's pretty much what it is. It's like an investment sort of account that allows you to put money aside so it doesn't impact your benefit, but at the same time you can accumulate assets so you can live a good life. A lot of people ask me what happens after I pass away, like what's happened with that money. So that money, probably you don't want to be able to leave it to your kids or anything like that. It's probably going to be taking over any medical expenses that you have. So let's say that you were getting medical treatment and Medicaid were covered, they will stop Medicaid take whatever you have in that account, pay, and then whatever is left, the Medicaid will cover. So you cannot leave that money to your, children or family or anything like that. It's for you to live and to accumulate assets and to accumulate enough so you can have those big purchases that Andres talked about, like big equipment that you need or any accommodations that you need. So, anybody have any questions about the ABLE account? Nope. So we will send a one pager with all the description of the account, how to open, the eligibility is really easy to read, the website, the Treasury Department manages those accounts here in Illinois, and they have a great customer service, so you can call them too. So yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Barbara. Again, really utilizing this and NDI, National Disability Institute, the individuals that were really adamant about telling like us that this is really one of the biggest tools out there to help individuals kind of save and think about financial future within the restrictions of income limits. So I think this is a great point of education for participants just to be informed about what's out there. And so, yeah, we have two case studies here that were just kind of provided as examples of what can be done. So like John receives SSI payments, he's 21, he attends a local community college, and basically his disability was already determined, he's, in school, and he's able to save and pay for his education by using something like the Virginia Able Now program, right? Mary and Juan want to start kind of supporting their daughter, and so sometimes people can open their account for their younger son or daughter or person they're taking care of, and they can open the account for that individual and have others contribute to it as well, as a way of really kind of setting up someone for their future, especially knowing that you're going to have big expenses for assistive technology later on in life. All right. So when it comes to savings, they really individuals distributing SSI and SSDI, that's Social Security Office, they want you to understand that if you have too many resources, then obviously that limits the amount of assistance that you get. And some of those resources are cash, bank accounts, land, vehicles, things that are assets that you can get money from. There is a limit of $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a couple. But for SSI, they don't count certain things, such as obviously like things that you have in your house, the home you live in, and the land that is on, rather than counting like a second home, right? Which is more of an income property. Certain life insurance policies don't get counted. And then if you have that ABLE account, up to $100,000 of funds in that account will not be counted. So again, this is why we talk about ABLE as a great savings tool, to really not how people think about how is this going to affect my day-to-day life, right? Debt repayment. So something that we have seen, and we've seen it with a lot of populations, is just people dealing with debt, and again, other people accessing that money, right? Because I think that is the most kind of important thing and nerve-wracking thing about that is, at what point am I going to have to be responsible, and where is that money coming from, right? And so I think helping people understand in general this, but I think, and I'll talk about why I talk about it in disabilities, really knowing the difference, you as a financial coach, between wage assignment and wage garnishment for anyone. A wage assignment is when you yourself give someone permission to dip into an account. Let's say, for example, you take out a payday loan, or maybe you gave access to someone to deposit funds into your bank account or to withdraw funds from your bank account. That's a wage assignment. That was started by you. And so at any point you can remove that. If you're paying off a debt, let's say like a prepaid, if you're paying off a debt, let's say maybe like a payday loan, like I just mentioned, you removing the permission for them, the wage assignment for them to go into your account does not remove the debt. The debt still exists. However, they will not be able to collect as a way of just like dipping in there. And I think we have a question.
I have a question about ABLE. When money is taken out of the ABLE account to be used for a large, is there a tax consequence? No, the money is not taxable. The money can be put there, for example, not before your taxes when you are working. Let's say that you're working, you have to wait until it's taxed before you can put it in the ABLE. But after you take it out from the ABLE to purchase this medical equipment, it is tax-free. It is to help that individual kind of like finance their disability expenses. And this is based on a law that was passed. So no, there's no tax consequences. And there's no age minimum, like they don't have to wait a certain amount of years or anything like that to take it out or anything like that.
Thank you. That's a great question. And also, Patricia also posted another question, kind of a comment. As we're talking about youth or people with criminal records or disabilities, if you're looking for other options as to how to, obtain income through other ways that are maybe non-traditional, like employment, you're able to go through the AmeriCorps program and receive a stipend. And it is not, you're right, it's not a lot of money, but it can really help with that resume building. It is kind of an alternative way of thinking about moving and transitioning into the workforce. And so I think that is a great comment. How can we find maybe even paid internships, right? Or things like AmeriCorps, where individuals can put in time, obtain work experience, and get paid at the same time. So I just want to say thank you for that comment as well. And so we talked about wage assignment a little bit and how wage assignment is it was basically initiated by the individual, and that permission can be removed by that individual as well. In contrast to that, garnishment is court mandated. So the company decided they were going to take you to court, you get a judgment, you go and you stand in front of the court, and the court says, okay, you are responsible for paying this debt. Right? In most cases, they will garnish your employment funds, your income, your employment income. However, let's say you don't have employment income, and so they'll try to go after your other sources of income. For individuals with disabilities obtaining SSDI, disability insurance, they're not allowed to garnish SSDI, debt collectors. And so there is an objection to garnishment. However, that doesn't apply to everyone. The IRS, federal student loans, and child support are all allowed to garnish part of your SSDI after they have tried to create a payment plan with you. So again, really, across the board, telling individuals, like in whatever population, when you get into it with federal, companies such as child support, federal student loans, and IRS, they're going to get their money.
And I don't think the ABLEs are safe either from the IRS or the child support federal student loans.
And so you want to have those conversations with individuals, right? Not only your goals, but also like, okay, how are you going to be accessing, and what are some of those barriers that might, do you have problems with the IRS? Are you, dealing with the federal student loans or child support? And if so, what are other alternatives that we can explore? Right. Medical debt. I bring up the medical debt section in this area, although it applies to everyone. I bring it up in individuals with disabilities because they have this community disproportionately has way more medical debt and way more medical expenses. And as we all know, insurance in this country is not amazing. And so whatever doesn't get covered by insurance has to be paid by the individuals. So depending on the person's financial situation, that money may or may not be able to be paid off. Now, what impact does this have on your credit report? So if you're familiar with, reviewing your credit report, you know that when something goes to collections, the collections agency immediately puts it on your credit report and they start collecting, right? They now have, you know, X amount of time to go after you and go after that money. However, based on the National Consumer Assistance Plan, when it comes to medical debt, credit bureaus now have to wait 180 days before they report medical collections. And so if it is a large sum of money that maybe you're working on paying off, or if it's something that maybe your insurance is still working on deciding if they're going to pay or not, credit, basically there's a 180-day kind of like period where that can happen before this medical collection goes on your report. And so again, it basically is just creating a little bit more support for individuals and really taking into consideration kind of the, you know, all those things that need to happen, such as maybe insurance taking care of it, and again, realizing that these are usually bigger debts. When it comes to student loan, I think a really good resource, and I think as coaches, what we can do with participants is help them navigate the process of TPD forgiveness. So TPD forgiveness is total and permanent disability. And so if you have federal student loans, you are able to apply if you can prove that you have a disability and meet other requirements. You can actually apply for TPD, which is total and permanent disability forgiveness. All right. So what that does is that it relieves you from having to pay the direct loans, the federal education loans, and Perkin loans. Or if you needed to complete a teach grant, it also gives you permission. Well, it basically frees you from having to complete that program. You do have to prove that you are totally and permanently disabled, and then they're going to review it. And then as of January of 2018, before, TPD forgiveness used to be taxed, but as of 2018, it will not be taxed. However, it's not retroactive. So I just want everyone to know that that's just another benefit now of like total and permanent disability. And a lot of the times people already have this document if they're applying for other types of public benefits or other type of assistance. And so it really is just kind of collecting and helping someone stay motivated throughout this process of getting approved for TPD. Because it is such a kind of like a big forgiveness, they are going to ask for a lot of documents. And again, as a coach, you just want to make sure that you are keeping people motivated and organized throughout this process, and just so that people feel supported. But this is a great resource, especially as we talk about, you know, student debt and how awful it is. You know, how can you, an individual in a certain, you know, in a certain experience, in a certain population, how can you benefit at least from the resources that are out there? And then I kind of want to round out this lesson by really talking about financial abuse. We talked about a little bit about representative payees. And so I think that is a way that people can financially abuse individuals. But I think that there's more than just personal or interpersonal financial abuse. There's also consumer financial abuse. If you think about, I mean, it might not be overt, but if you think about the lack of accessibility of certain products, that is absolutely, or protections of certain products, that's absolutely like not benefiting the participant, right? And then there's interpersonal. You think about exactly what we were talking about earlier, the caretaker controlling all the money, or maybe the misuse of disability income. If you think about those situations where disability or individuals with disability are very intertwined with their family and there's, you know, trauma, you have to think about, okay, well, why are people making these decisions and how are these decisions affecting others? And is this a situation that the participant wants to be in or not? And we as coaches, as we navigate that conversation, we can't say, hey, it sounds like, you know, this is happening. But what you can say is, hey, if you don't feel comfortable just having that conversation so candidly, the once again, the CFPB booklet developed with National Disability Institute has a checklist, and all it is a series of questions that really help, as a coach, bring to light, right? Maybe something or some situations that might be happening that might lead someone to believe that, okay, this is financial abuse. And so it's tricky, but I think it's an important conversation to have, especially for those participants who don't feel like they have enough control of their finances, or if they've identified that someone else taking care of their money is a barrier. I think that might be a good time to have that conversation. And I wanted to provide you all with some resources before we do like a final Q&A. So the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities has resources here in Chicago for individuals with disabilities. But I think as coaches and as providers in your community, I think one thing that you can definitely take advantage of, and I don't know if they're doing this anymore due to coronavirus and COVID, the whole crisis. However, they were coming out to organizations and doing presentations on individuals with disabilities and resources that are available. My guess is that they have moved into a virtual training kind of space. However, they are a good resource for just educating your organization and really telling you these are the things that are available through the city of Chicago. And also accessibility. So the way that accessibility is kind of handled in the United States is regionally. So like the region here that helps kind of like the Midwest, it's called the Great Lakes ADA Center, Department on Disability and Human Development. And so what they do is they have a variety of resources. Each kind of area of the country has their own resources on things like assistive devices, job training programs, basically any kind of information that might assist individuals in that area and in relation to disability. I know that their website is the one that you can actually go on there, and because accessibility and because assistive devices are so expensive, they've actually created a kind of a sharing network. So like a secondhand network, or like almost like an offer up, right? Ability for people to use and to have access to used accessibility devices and assistive devices, or an opportunity for individuals to find them way cheaper than if they were to purchase them new. And so you want to leverage those resources before thinking, okay, how do I need to prepare? What can I actually access first, right? Moving back to employment, I mentioned that through WIOA, there were a few different kind of specific programs that would help individuals. And so there's the Ticket to Work, okay? So Ticket to Work is basically a work incentives planning and assistance program. There's a trial work period, so it allows individuals to decide, oh, hey, I can try out working and see if this is for me, right? Without it affecting my benefits. So that already is great, right? Gives participants an opportunity to really explore this without it affecting benefits. They can also continue your Medicare, and if you have work expenses related to your disability, then you're able to get assistance with that, okay? With this program, this Ticket to Work program, you can basically earn $1,180 a month before your benefits are affected. This gives participants, if you can be approved for this program and you can go through this program as a recipient of SSDI, you can earn a lot of money before it even affecting your SSDI. SSI is a little different, but SSDI, you can earn this much after the trial, throughout the after the trial period, I'm sorry, and it won't be affected. And if you have a disability such as blindness, you can actually make a little bit more. And if you're under 22 in a school or job training program, you will also be able to make more. So again, it's benefiting those participants who are even more marginalized. And I think that this is a good talking point for participants to being like, well, if you're nervous about it, there's a program which allows you to kind of feel it out first before deciding if this is something that you want to continue. And then if you need some additional support, there is a plan to achieve self-support, which is called PASS. Okay, so the Social Security Administration will basically assign you a case manager, which will allow you to create with them a plan for self-support. And then once that plan is approved, what it really gives you the opportunity to do is to save for expenses without it affecting your benefits. Okay, so let's say you don't have ABLE, but you do want to go back to work, and you do have some expenses that might, might put you over that $2,000 threshold or income limit. You can create this plan to achieve self-support, and once you've identified that maybe transportation or tuition, childcare, kind of this broad area of things that you might need related to work, all of that could be covered without you necessarily have to worry about going over your income limits. And so again, it really is, as a coach, showing individuals like there are safety nets, right? And I can try to help you strengthen those by, giving you the resource and really helping you navigate it. The paying for assistive devices resources, which I told you earlier I was going to share. Illinois actually has an assistive technology program, and so I have provided the link for that there. But really, what it does is it allows you to access loans with low interest rates, which is also helpful for your credit if that is something that you're co-working with, or if you can't access maybe a traditional loan. Or you can even access smaller credit builder loans, which could be accessed for assistive technology. Let's say maybe you only need like a hearing aid or something that's maybe lower cost. You could get a credit builder loan and then build credit as you access this technology. And then there's a paying for devices tool in the CFPB guide for disabilities, meaning that it will tell you, once again, with this tool, you'll be able to organize how much it costs, how long it'll be able to take you to pay for it. Is there anyone that's willing to help or able to help? And that document itself actually has some resources as well. So I would encourage you to take a look at it once you receive that Dropbox email. And then Lifeline. Lifeline is just a free telephone service for low-income individuals. And so you just want to be able to provide all kinds of information for participants who might be able to save a little bit money here and there. And then I did provide some financial abuse advocacy resources, simply because not everyone feels comfortable talking about this, or if you do need to make a referral, you can always talk to Adult Protective Services. The Illinois Attorney General has a hotline as well. The FTC, you can report to them if you feel like you're being financially abused. And then Legal Aid Foundation has a program for individuals over 60 who might be experiencing financial abuse. So again, giving individuals just the resources to advocate for themselves and to really explore that a little bit more and figuring out how they can regain a little bit of control in this situation. All right, so before I finish up with maybe like 2 case studies, who, if anyone, has questions about employment, or if you have any tips or resources, this would be a great opportunity for you to share them also. And then we can share them with the group. I'm going to be honest with you, my trainings are definitely a little bit more interactive, and especially during disabilities and reentry, I like having people share resources that they might have, simply because, certain case managers at different organizations have established relationships or might have, individual kind of resources that are not well known. So if you have anything to share, now would be the time. And if not, we'll just go ahead and move on. So I'm going to give you maybe like about 30 seconds, see if anyone wants to share. And if not, we'll just move on. All right. Okay, well, kind of to finish this section off, I've given you a variety of resources. Hopefully they're helpful. Again, because a lot of it is so technical and a lot of the kind of income limit and figuring all of that out is so individual, you know, it's so it's based on the individual and their situation. You really just want to help facilitate conversations around, I mean, as a coach, I think where you can be the most useful, or where I found to be myself the most useful, is facilitating conversations around, is going back to work really right for me, and really what are those safety nets that are held there in case it doesn't work out for me, right? It is reassuring individuals like, although this might affect your benefits, it will not affect them fully, right? And helping them navigate those conversations. And really, how can we get more power in the individual's hands through financial coaching, and how will that then kind of translate into other aspects of their life? So I have a case study here, and this is something that actually happened to me. I worked with someone like this, so I'm going to go ahead and pose it. And I would really love if in the chat you would, not in the chat, in the questions, you would go ahead and just put how you would coach this individual. So Sarah's an individual with a visual impairment, and she's looking for employment. She states that she does not know how to start her job search or where to start her job search, and she's afraid that she will not get hired due to this disability, this visual impairment. She has not worked in a few years, and she wants to know if there are any available resources to help her. So how would you go about this coaching conversation with this individual? A WIOA program, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. I mean, that is a, that's a government program that's there to help, and it really helps individuals be supported and really understand that they can try this program out without it affecting their benefits. I think that that's super, super beneficial. Um, Also have a tour, even apply to Chicago Lighthouse to help see what's out there. That's excellent. A lot of people with existing visual impairments have already very familiar with Chicago Lighthouse. But if you're working with someone who is not familiar with Chicago Lighthouse, they have a variety of job training programs, and they also have opportunities for employment there. So a lot of it is, uh, with my participant, informed me that a lot of it is phone work just because of the nature of the visual impairment. And so you do have to navigate exactly what the participant wants to do and what is actually available, because their collaboration is that, right? And so I think that Patricia said something really important, talking to them about previous employment experiments, what they're interested in doing, and what is the technology that they need. And I think that that's very true. I asked my participant what they wanted to do, and they didn't want to do the things that were available through the lighthouse, right? And so for me, it was really about supporting that individual in applying to more traditional jobs, and really explaining, how to maintain, how to keep motivated throughout the process of looking for a traditional employment via just applying, right? And then Carly mentioned Ezra Employment Services. So thank you for, yeah, that's another employment agency who's able to help. And so I'm gonna go ahead and write that one down so that I can share the link for Ezra, in case participants want to access that. And so it's 2:57. We're finished early. Before I wrap up, I want to give everyone one final opportunity for questions. If there are no additional questions, I'm going to remind you about a few things. One is that I have pretty much already drafted this follow-up email for you all. You will get a Dropbox link. You will get links to some of the things that we've talked about, including the CFPB, including Ezra that we mentioned right now, including those organizations for child support, and employment for individuals with records. All of those resources will be shared with you. I want to kind of promote our Wealth and Wellness Train the Trainer. So All Chicago is going to be hosting us again to be doing a 3-session Train the Trainer. Our Wealth and Wellness curriculum is a series of lessons, of financial literacy lessons that are that can be facilitated either one-on-one or in group settings. We talk about different things such as values, budgeting, credit, debt, banking, fintech, and then we apply that lens of transforming impossible into possible, which is that psychological self-sufficiency program by Dr. Hung at Loyola Cross. For those of you interested in learning more about the TIP program, I am also going to provide a link for the TIP program in case you are interested in becoming a TIP trainer, which they are currently training people for. So I will share that. But if you're interested in learning more about that program, which is a really great program, and then learning how we have incorporated that into financial coaching, the addressing of the barriers and hope actions, it would be really awesome if you could just join us. This training will be free. It is 3 different sessions, but it's very robust, filled with activities, and we're hoping that it'll keep you, very engaged, and it will provide you with a lot of really hands-on things that you can do with participants. And then finally, I just want to say thank you. Thank you all for being here. We really, really appreciate it. I wanted to go ahead and share contact information for myself, Harrison, who is our Financial Technology Innovations Project Leader, and Barbara Martinez, who is our manager, in case you have any additional questions. And then I am going to go ahead and share that email with you all so that you have access to the materials. If you have issues accessing that, let me know. And, as we move into working from home in COVID, we're also being more active online, kind of creating short videos to really give people information. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about financial coaching work, you can follow us on Twitter. If you have any final questions, now's the time. If not, you can always talk to Torlin about CEUs and the LMS system. But with that, I am going to go ahead and end this training. And thank you for that feedback, Patricia. I really appreciate it. We will see you soon. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.